The top 10 reasons we don't set boundaries effectively. Now, I'm going to do this list as a top 10 countdown. You can let me know what you agree with or what you disagree with. But I developed this list from working with people as a psychotherapist over 20 years, as well as through my boundary program, where people fill out questionnaires for me on what holds them back from setting effective boundaries. So let's go. Number 10, a lack of self awareness and skill. So, this is really the learning part of setting boundaries. The self awareness is about knowing what your values are, what you desire, what your needs are, your limits. All of that goes into setting those boundaries. And then the skill comes in terms of learning assertive speech and how to set those boundaries, how to speak them. So, this is where people usually start with boundaries, which is why it's number 10. And it's also where a lot of information focuses. This is your information gathering stage, but it's actually not the hardest part of setting boundaries. So let's keep going here. Number 9 is cultural and societal expectations. Some cultures or societies might kind of pigeonhole you in a role that doesn't feel like it fits for you. And that can make it really difficult to break out of that role. Different cultures prioritize the collective versus the individual differently, but don't make the mistake of thinking that the very individualized cultures always have better boundaries because those might actually have walls, not boundaries. So there's a balance with boundaries in terms of taking care of one's social group and taking care of oneself and having a balance with that. But very often, cultural expectations and societal pressures can get in our way. And the counter to that is having a support group, having a therapist who supports you in setting these boundaries, or a subsection of your social group that can support you in determining your boundaries and really individuating. That would be really about becoming the individual you're meant to be, which could still be an individual that cares about their family and other people. So don't feel like this is all or nothing. And I'm going to get to that one soon. Actually, that is the next one. So, number 8, seeing boundaries as all or nothing will make it really hard to set and hold effective and healthy boundaries. We tend to see boundaries as it's either like, okay, it's their needs that matter and I have to do what they want, or it's what I want and they need to do what I want. Either I put everybody else first or I put myself first. There's no in between. So the counter to this one is to look for the in between because relationships are part of our self care as long as they're healthy. And boundaries are about healthy, balanced relationships. So seeing that all or nothing, that's going to get in the way of effective boundary setting. Number 7, fear of a major reprisal. So we have a lot of difficulty setting boundaries in those situations which are really important. So, for example, if you financially need your job, it makes it a lot harder to set boundaries or say no or put limits on the situation, right? Or if you're in a marriage and you have children and you really don't want the marriage to break up, and you are really afraid that if you begin to assert yourself and set boundaries, that there'll be a major, major retaliation. So in these situations, it can be really hard to figure out what the appropriate boundaries are and how you can appropriately set them to your advantage as well as to your social group, your family, your financial situation. And the keys to this are to really think it through and to look again for that middle ground. It might not be an all or nothing situation. There might be room for compromise, negotiation. And yes, sometimes people are like, oh, you can't mention compromise if I'm setting a boundary. But you know what? In a healthy enough relationship, boundaries really are about discussion and compromise and figuring something out to find a middle ground. And in those situations which aren't healthy enough, but there's a major reprisal or major retaliation on us, a major consequence perhaps, it might be to our advantage to look for that compromise, at least initially, until we can work ourselves out of that situation. If that didn't make sense, or let me know if it did make sense, okay? But if you're in one of these really high stress, really important situations, really thinking it through and maybe looking initially for a middle ground, and then also falling back on the support that we talked about earlier. Very important. Number six thing getting in the way of setting effective boundaries is that we really are not setting a boundary. We are trying to get the other person to change. Our boundary is really intended to change the other person. And if that's fully the intent of the boundary, then it's not about taking care of ourselves, protecting ourselves. It's not about our own inner boundaries, which are there and can be there no matter what the other person's behavior. So I know this is a really complicated one because, of course, when we set boundaries, we want the other person's behavior to change. But that doesn't always happen, and we can't always make it happen. So our boundaries really have to be about us and for us to be effective. Number five reason that we can't set effective boundaries, we are afraid of conflict. So it's very common to fear conflict, want to avoid conflict, and then to not speak up in a situation that might become conflictual. And often setting boundaries is conflictual, but conflict is necessary in life, it's necessary in relationships. So if you have a fear of conflict that's really holding you back from taking care of yourself, it's really helpful to look into where that fear of conflict came from and what it's about. And this is actually going to relate to my point number one. So I'm going to come back to it. Number four reason we can't set effective boundaries is the fear of not being liked. We get almost panicked sometimes if we think people aren't going to like us. Now, this doesn't apply to everybody, but this can be a biggie. And again, here, if there is this very strong fear that you won't be liked, really digging into where did that come from? What is it I'm really afraid of here? And how do I begin to heal this fear? Because it's not necessarily, people think of it as, oh, I don't want to be a people pleaser anymore, and I'm mad that I'm a people pleaser. But it's really more about healing that fear. And that fear might be tied to abandonment, probably tied to things that happened in childhood. And I'm going to come back to that as well. Number three, fear of hurting other people's feelings. Again, this doesn't apply to everybody, but a number of people in my courses have said, like, I have all this empathy, and when somebody else is in pain, I feel pain, and I hate inflicting pain on them. And if I say no, or I withdraw support in one area that no longer is serving either of us, I still know it will hurt them and I can't hurt them. So it's this real fear. And empathy is a wonderful thing. We do not want to lose our empathy. But this is where some internal work on emotional boundaries is really helpful. Whose feelings are you feeling? Whose feelings are you taking care of? And sometimes, if people get angry at our boundaries, or they get upset, or they get hurt by them, it's not really about us and the boundary. It's more about how they're responding. In some cases, you could say how they're choosing to respond. In other cases, it might seem like they don't have a choice. But we can't protect other people from their emotions. And if we've thought through our values and we've thought about how to express it, and we've thought through the relationship's important, but it needs to be healthy, and this boundary is going to help it be healthy, then we're not being mean. We're not being purposefully hurtful. So this is the number three reason. And it's also going to tie to number two and number one. The number two reason we have a hard time setting boundaries. This is about our past experiences and traumas, and primarily those based in childhood and with our family of origin. So it's within our family of origin that we learn how to be in relationship. We learn what a relationship is supposed to be. We learn what our role is supposed to be. And then as we grow up, until we do a lot of work. It can be very hard to get out of that role, which has caused us to cut off parts of ourselves in order to stay in relationship and maybe support the family. Maybe we were the parentified child, maybe we were the caretaker, or maybe we were really the emotional caretaker of others. And in order to do that, we had to cut off parts of ourselves. And then we replay that in one relationship after another as we go through life until we heal. So, what we learn in childhood is something that really needs to be investigated, not with a sense of blaming. I always try to say this is a fact finding mission, not a fault finding mission. We're not looking to blame parents or grandparents or, because this stuff usually goes back generations and generations. But it's more looking for the facts of how did this impact me? And how did that impact stay with me through my other relationships? How is it influencing my relationships now? How is it causing me to either hold back from setting boundaries or be way too assertive in my setting of boundaries? And actually, I shouldn't use the word assertive there. I should say way too aggressive in setting the boundaries because assertive is an I'm okay, you're okay, balanced approach. And I'm going to pop some information here on the screen before I go to the number one reason, which is about the boundary program that I have, because I do have a whole section on assertive language and assertive communication and how you can effectively set these boundaries. But the program also gets to one of the real core issues underneath all of these difficulties in setting boundaries, which is the number one issue, which is your negative core belief. So when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, actually, most families have some dysfunction somewhere around, and we will learn usually something negative about ourselves that we believe to be true, even though it's not true. But we develop negative core beliefs from very difficult situations, and those underlie all these boundary problems. I'm going to give you some examples, but it also underlies most of the problems we have in life. Again, working with people as a therapist and using some EMDR tools and techniques, it was amazing to me how many, many different situations in their lives, if you just keep drilling down and drilling down into those core beliefs, they come to basically one, two, or maybe three core negative beliefs. So, some negative core beliefs that are really common that impact boundaries and people's ability to set them are my needs don't matter. My needs aren't as important as other people's needs. My emotions don't matter. My emotions are not as important as other people's emotions. It could also be a general feeling of I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough. There could be a feeling of I'm in danger if I'm not perfect, or I'm in danger if I don't put other people's needs first. I'm in danger if I'm selfish. I can't trust others, so then I have to do everything. Like it's my job to have all this responsibility. So, those are some negative core beliefs that can really impact our ability to navigate healthy relationships. And healing those negative core beliefs is super important. So I mentioned we do that within the boundary program, but I also do have a free PDF, Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs. It helps you identify the negative core belief. And then it also helps you, it gives you 3 ways to begin to overturn and heal that core belief. So the link for that will be in the description to this video. If you got value out of today's video, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button. It's a big help to me. Post any questions you might have. I'll take a look and perhaps record a video in answer. And lastly, let me know what you think of the top 10 countdown of the reasons we can't set effective boundaries. Okay, see you next week.